Welcome to Next in Tech, an S&P Global Market Intelligence podcast where the world of emerging tech lives. I'm your host, Eric Hanselman, Chief Analyst for Industry and Company Data at S&P Global Market Intelligence. And today, we're going to be digging into developer experience and automation and the impacts of AI and really where these are all fitting together. And joining me to discuss it today are Gina Atelsek, part of our Analyst team. Gene, welcome back.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
And Deepak Singh, Vice President AWS, who's in charge of developer experience. Deepak, it's great to have you on the podcast.
Thanks for having me. Great to be here.
Well, it's an interesting topic, especially as we're rolling through all of the bubbliness that exists within AI use cases and applications. And the pieces of code generation, developer impacts are one of those areas that have been getting significant traction, and an area where we've seen significant interest and return on investment for organizations. I guess maybe to start out with, I wanted to look at what the landscape is of developer experience and what are the improvements you're seeing, and I guess what's your take on really what is that scope of capabilities that we can bring to bear to make developers more productive and to improve code development in general?
If you go back to about 2 years ago when the first coding assistant started showing up, the thing that they did, and developers liked it, was it helped them type faster. And it's like you start typing in your editor, and your assistant starts telling you what the next 5 words should be, or next 5 next function should be, and that part got more sophisticated and faster over time. But what we learned very quickly was it wasn't sufficient. A lot of senior engineers, the people really trying to solve hard problems, they said, I understand the code base. I can type faster than the AI because I'm actually not just typing. I'm also thinking through the problem. So help me solve the problem. And this is where I think the last, I would say, 6 to 9 months have been transformational. And that's because of the rise of agents. And I'll give you an example of something an agent can do that can change your lives. From a Slack message that somebody sent me last week. They were, in this particular case, using one of our products, the QCLI, for this, but it's an example of what agents help you do. They had a set of 100 or so tasks, and they had asked the agent to go solve those tasks for them. The agent did it to task number 1. It did task number 2. It did task number 3. It figured out on its own that it had done the same thing 3 times and wrote itself, without being prompted, a Python script to do the remaining 97 automatically. And that ability to understand what the goal is, figure out that it has access to tools like the ability to write itself a script, and then execute on that with human intervention, if required, is what makes agents remarkable, and that's what changes productivity, in a significant way, as opposed to just help me type faster, which is where we started. And at that time, it felt like magic, and now it feels like that was the Stone Ages. So I think that's just an example.
Autocomplete is certainly good, but it's, to your point, it's the second-order capabilities of being able to now have agents take action beyond it that really seems to be shifting the landscape in terms of some of the capabilities. Now, granted, especially for lower-level, entry-level programmers, junior programmers in various forms, the fundamentals are great, but we now start to shift that game pretty significantly in terms of what we can expect and the different ways in which we ought to be thinking about some of these capabilities.
Yeah, I'll say another in terms of modernizing applications. The senior engineers that are still around may not know what the code does. If they're looking at a legacy code base that's in COBOL that was written by an engineer that retired 30 years ago. And so the ability to understand and interpret what's actually happening in a program is, I think, helping a lot in terms of modernizing those older code bases and reducing technical debt.
Well, I guess that really gets us into that question of, is this something that is fundamentally changing development patterns? And I guess, Deepak, as you're pointing out, certainly there's that level of automation, there's task offloading that we can do with an agentic set of capabilities. Uh, are we getting to a point at which we're changing what that developer role looks like?
Yeah, I don't think so. I think we are changing how developers build. For example, and some of it has to do with how the agents are improving and the underlying models are improving. Some of it is just developers building trust, but also building new habits. Uh, for sure, I think you alluded to this. There are agents that can take your issues in GitHub or GitLab and convert them into pull requests, right? You can give them backlog items and they can do the stuff that you don't have time to do. You can help them write your documentation, write your unit tests, all of that. But I think one of the changes that I've seen happen, I've seen it in my teams, I've seen it with our customers as well. As they've gotten more used to using AI, I would say 6 months ago, people would write small pieces of code, right? I'm going to go work on this little piece, have the AI write it up. And that's where you started seeing metrics like acceptance rates and all that. Because when you're working on small little chunks, you can do that. What I see developers doing now, especially those who've been doing this for a while, is they're getting very comfortable with letting the agent or the AI write a lot of the code up front. And then whether they're prompting it, vibe coding or whatever you want to call it, or whether they are going in and doing it manually, the refactoring part or enhancing it, they're doing it afterwards, as opposed to writing a little piece, checking it, then going on. They write all of it up front, and then they go back and edit it. And I've seen this happen more and more and more often. It's actually starting to impact how we think about the user interfaces that we build as well, because it feels like over the last 3, 4, 5 months, the behavior of how developers are using these tools has also evolved. And I think some of it has to do with it's some more experienced engineers starting to use it, and they know what they want to accomplish. It's now just a tool in their arsenal to get to the endpoint, and they're taking advantage of that tool. In sometimes, I think they discover new ways as they go along. So it's a great time to be a developer in my mind.
Well, especially if you're identifying that you're seeing evolution even in terms of months. The challenge, of course, with dev processes in general has been individual developers have got a way of working. They've got a set of the way they actually approach a problem. I know back when I was coding, although I don't think anybody would want to see me code very much today. It's there's I was going to say more art than science, but there's a logic to how you're approaching a problem, and each developer approaches it slightly different. It's not necessarily a rote activity, and it's one though that as a result winds up being relatively challenging because different developers will approach the process slightly differently. But it seems like we've gotten to a point at which assistant technologies that are out there have the ability to adapt in ways that can account for whichever direction or whichever path a developer starts to follow.
I was just going to say that's really where the agentic AI comes in, is its ability to adapt to a developer's way of working. And I think, with respect to how developer experience is improving, I think these technologies are making developers happier. It's making them more productive. It's making their jobs more interesting.
Yeah, I mean, and the tooling around these agents is also helping. Everybody talks about MCP servers, etc., which you can use to customize, add your build environment or build tooling in there. But you can also add steering rules. Uh, for example, I've seen some developers uh, just for their own, because they like it that way. Give an agent a file. You can give them, write something in Markdown and tell the agent to use it, which makes the agent's responses more philosophical. All they're doing is changing the way the agent responds to them. The code part isn't changing at all, but it just makes them more happy to use it as part of the development flow. And this is a trivial example. They do more meaningful things as well, but the tooling is also helping make it a fun experience for them.
Well, but isn't that really one of those things that has been core to the uniqueness of an individual developer's environment? I mean, everybody tweaks their IDEs. Everybody's sort of tuning things until it's just right, and little things that for them personally, make it a little easier. Whether back in the day it was like keyboard shortcuts, right?
Yep.
Now you're actually getting towards tuning the way your assistants and your agents are actually going to be responding to you. A natural and incremental shift in terms of where this is headed.
Exactly.
I'm curious about use cases. And actually, Gene, you had brought up app modernization. And one of the things we've been seeing in our Voice of the Enterprise data is that app modernization is getting a significant amount of focus in terms of cloud-associated services capabilities.
That's right. Our survey on budgets and outlook that was in the field earlier this year said that app modernization of the cloud adjacent, so not direct spending on cloud, but cloud adjacent IT spending, was the number one category that expected to have an increase in spending for the following year. So I think another thing that these AI these AI innovations are enabling is to have companies take another look at projects that may have been prohibitively expensive or, too time consuming, too distracting before, and saying, now that we have these tools to speed the process, it might be worth it to take another look at that mainframe database and see if we can migrate it to maybe a cloud implementation or a different format.
Yeah, I mean, 5 years ago, I was having a conversation with a client of ours who was saying, look, they were using strangle patterns for mainframe code transitions, but they knew that the core of their application was simply too complicated. I mean, this is the difficulty we've had forever in software, right? We build big monolithic applications, and we pack a lot of business logic into that. And the fear is that, okay, we can update, we can transition it to a new platform, but will we lose some essential element of that business logic that got built into the app? And just because digesting that much code is just simply too complex for an individual, and how could you coordinate teams across that? And so the risk factor associated with it is so high. Strangely enough, we're now in a world in which AI gets really good at ingesting very large volumes of data. Suddenly, things have changed.
And AI is very good at explaining things to you. I mean, at least doing it, the whole decomposition and documentation part is actually where AI is quite good. When we built a mainframe modernization agent, the thing that the agent does first actually is write the documentation. Because if you go back to all the old COBOL code, the people who wrote it are gone. Nobody understands how it works. And then doing the domain decomposition, and it's not even write the code for me. That's almost the easy part. The which pieces should we rewrite, because and what do they do is probably the harder thing, which is what's to your point stops a lot of these modernization projects, because people like, okay, this is too complicated. And I think you don't even have to solve it. You just have to make it that much easier that it becomes worth somebody's time.
Yeah, to be able to address the scale and deliver on that understanding. To your point, even just simply being able to deliver, to document what the code's doing has such tremendous value. Because again, you can start to go re-architect, or you can understand how you want to re-architect. Which pieces do you start to shift first? How do you actually decompose what is this great, huge environment in ways that can start to make sense? If you need transaction processing at high rates and a low level, okay, great. Maybe you keep that core piece. If you need atomicity transaction pieces, maybe you keep it, but everything that's wrapping around it, you migrate, and maybe you can migrate the entire app. Well, we've talked a bit about agents. Where do we see concerns about what agents can potentially do? Because, of course, There are always levels of concerns about confabulation within AI and building levels of trust. And certainly it seems like the interactive nature that we're looking at with a lot of coding assistants currently, it helps to build trust, but still we're overcoming what are some fundamental concerns about some level of risk in terms of what this transition looks like. What do you see as ways which organizations are starting to help to build trust and overcome some of those concerns?
So I think with the interactive agents, it's easier because you are in the driver's seat. You are seeing the chain of thought. You can cancel it. You can do what it wants. You're also talking about processes that last seconds to minutes. Where I think a lot of your questions come into play and what we hear from customers is around the autonomous side of agents. When agents have access to a lot of data or they can execute tasks on your behalf, how do you make sure that bad things do not happen? So from our perspective, for example, the way we think about it is around controls. Like it's in the end, it is defense on depth. Even take something as simple as software engineering, where you are generating more code, even with interactive agents. One of the things that we talk to customers about is what are the controls you have today to make sure that the code quality is high. You do code reviews, you write tests, you write documentation. Now agents can help you do some of that, including initial code reviews and code scanning. But you need at least one human in the loop to verify that, to do that final code review before you check it in. And once it's checked in, um, life is easier. The good news is that a lot of customers have some of these checks and balances in already. They're hiring engineers, and on day one, they don't trust the engineer as they might on day 50. But even the best engineers make mistakes, right? Things happen. So make sure you're using some of the same checks and balances that you have in place today. But I think as agents get more autonomy, and this is what you'll see being built by us, other people in the industry, by customers themselves, is what role do permissions play? Like what access control becomes really important. What data does an agent have access to? What are the things you are allowing an agent to do or not allowing them to do? What tools can they use? Because in a world of MCP and other tool use systems, not every MCP server is something the agent should potentially have access to. Maybe for your own fun project, but maybe not at an enterprise level. So as we talk to enterprise customers, the things that they're asking us to do is things like make sure that you have the right access controls in place, or we have ways of governing it. So that's very important. The other thing that people are concerned about, at least with code is concerned, is around copyright and licensing. So for example, right from the beginning, we've had a reference tracker that flags potential licensing violation, where somebody can go and say, okay, this looks like something that's, GPLv3 as an example. Go investigate, take a look at it. Make sure a business line lawyer is also looking at it. So it's belts and suspenders in the end, and taking advantage of some of the tooling that we already have. But I think to your question, it's not optional. You have to do it.
Well, and it's one of those challenges that I think organizations have wrestled with. We don't see complete levels of code scanning, composition analysis, even before we get there. And I think your point is a really important one. Yeah, in the same way that all of these basic software hygiene pieces should be in place, it doesn't change anything when you start moving to an agentic model. One of my favorite examples recently is that keeps bubbling up is concerns about confabulated package names. Oh, and the fact that you're now getting slop squatting. Basically the concern being that AI code generator is going to go generate a package or is going to refer to a package and include it that doesn't actually exist. And whether or not that happens to be a name that's not quite correct, misspellings or optimizations of the package name, you've now got attackers who are creating packages with these confabulated names that get pulled into packages. Well, this is one of those things that's a basic software security skill that you should understand what's the package and dependency map that you're looking at. And the same way you do that with typos that a human developer would make, you should have controls in your environment to be able to catch those things as well. So yeah, I think to your point, exactly. It doubles the importance of having these kind of protections in place in a development environment as well.
With respect to MCP, I think the momentum that it has and the enthusiasm that it's getting is potentially, a risk factor when people are so enthusiastic about the capabilities that they may not be vetting the tools that they're giving agents access to. That's a danger that may go by the wayside as everyone kind of jumps on this bandwagon and starts, using and creating these agents.
Well, but again, isn't that one of those things that it was interesting at the RSA security conference just a few months ago, uh, the levels at which conversations about agentic action and protections were taking place. And it's evolved from, I think, the idea that first got farmed out there, which is, hey, agents need to be treated just like humans, to now to a point at which, like, no, agents actually need to be treated as a superset of the kind of things that an individual person would be doing, because they may have access to a broader set of tools. They may have access to broader sets of capabilities, but you still need to have those same sets of protections, similar kinds of controls for any activity that's taking place that you get in that setting as well. So yeah, it's again an evolution of where we're headed. But on that end, Deepak, I'm pondering, what are your thoughts about what organizations should be thinking about as they move forward? Should they be rethinking some of what they're looking at, and where do you think they should be headed, and how should enterprises consider it?
Yeah, I think one of the mistakes I've seen, and I'll reframe the mistakes enterprises made. One of the things we've seen our more successful customers do is find the right balance between allowing their people to explore and find out what these AI agents can do for them, versus saying, "Oh, we're going to spend the next 6 months building building all these guardrails." 6 months in AI is an eternity. You had like 3 generational changes in that time. So the key part that we've seen where people get successful is they make these tools available to their developers. They have the right guidance and guidelines and lightweight guardrails, because they do have to protect themselves, in place. And once they do so, the thousand flowers bloom. This is a bottoms up activity. You need organizational protection, like the leaders in those orgs need to let people know what's okay and what's not okay. But the most successful orgs are the ones where the senior engineers and the engineers, everybody looks to really adopt these tools, and then everybody tends to gravitate towards them. So that's what I think is very important. Now, I think as these tools go from, let's figure out how they work and whether they can be useful to us, to actually building applications, etc., you have to start slowly bringing in, okay, what are the things we need to do to make sure that we're doing it the right way? But because you've had experience, you kind of know what are the strengths and weaknesses of these tools. And so that's, I think, one of the things that I would encourage people to do. The second one is data. Context is king. And context comes from quality prompts, quality access to data, and understand, and nowadays, I guess, access to the right set of tools and MCP servers. If your data is in 5,000 different places, things are going to be hard. So making sure that your tools and your agents have good access to data with the right access controls, that's something that's worth investing in for most organizations.
Yeah, it's one of the things that we keep putting forward, is the idea that data is not the fuel. Data is the raw materials. And so you need to think differently about data as being that, not necessarily the driver, it's the fundamental component from which so much of the value of AI gets built. And again, has to be a focus area. Well, this has been a great conversation. There's so many different pieces that unfortunately I think we've left on the table that I'd love to dig into later. But I appreciate all your insights. Unfortunately, we are at time. But thank you very much for all of your insights.
Thank you very much.
Thanks for having me.
And that is it for this episode of Next in Tech. Thanks to our audience for staying with us. And thanks to our production team, including Sophie Carr, Franmia Deoshin, Kira Smith, and Adam Kowalski on the marketing and events teams. Please keep in mind that statements made by persons who are not S&P Global Market Intelligence employees represent their own views and are not necessarily the views of S&P Global Market Intelligence. I hope you'll join us for our next episode, where, coincidentally enough, we'll be talking about the Model Context Protocol, MCP. I hope you'll join us then, because there's always something next in tech.